The desire to explore is part and parcel of humanity's quest for progress. Seeking to broaden our horizons and further our knowledge, mankind has travelled far and wide. In the pre-modern era, few have trekked as extensively as the 14th century explorer Ibn Battuta. The adventurous Moroccan set out on a 3-decade-long expedition that saw him make his way across the span of Asia, various parts of sub-Saharan Africa, and throughout the Mediterranean. In this video, we will revisit his account of travelling to the Mongol Golden Horde in the Crimea to meet the powerful Ozbeg Khan. We stayed at Sinope about 40 days waiting for the weather to become favourable for sailing to the town of Kiram in the Crimea. Then we hired a vessel belonging to the Greeks and waited another 11 days for a favourable wind. At length we set sail, but after travelling for 3 nights, we were beset in mid-sea by a terrible tempest. The storm raged with unparalleled fury, then the wind changed and drove us back near to Sinope. The weather cleared and we set out again, and after another tempest like the former, we at length saw the hills on the land. We made for a harbour called Kirsh, intending to enter it, but some people on the hill made signs to us not to enter, and fearing that they were enemy vessels in the port, we turned back along the coast. As we approached the land, I said to the master of the ship, I want to descend here, so he put me ashore. The place was in the Kipchak desert, which is green and verdant, but flat and treeless. There is no firewood, so they make fires of dung, and you will see even the highest of them picking it up and putting it in the skirts of their garments. The only method of travelling in this desert is in wagons. It extends for 6 months' journey, of which 3 are in the territories of Sultan Mohammad Ozbeg. The day after our arrival, one of the merchants in our company hired some wagons from the Kipchaks who inhabited this steppe and who are Christians, and we came to Kaffa, a large town extending along the sea coast, inhabited by Christians, mostly Genoese, whose governor is called Demetrio. We stayed at Kaffa in the mosque of the Muslims. An hour after our arrival, we heard bells ringing on all sides. As I had never heard bells before, I was alarmed and made my companions ascend the minaret and read the Quran and issue the call to prayer. They did so, when suddenly a man entered wearing armour and weapons and greeted us. He told us that he was the Qadi of the Muslims there, and said, when I heard the reading and the call to prayer, I feared for your safety and came as you see. Then he went away, but no evil befell us. The next day the governor came to us and entertained us to a meal. Then we went round the city and found it provided with fine bazaars. All the inhabitants are infidels. We went down to the port and saw a magnificent harbour with about 200 vessels in it, ships of war and trading vessels, small and large, for it is one of the most notable harbours in the world. We hired a wagon and travelled to the town of Kiram, which forms part of the territories of Sultan Ozbeg Khan, and has a governor called Tuluk Tumur. On hearing of our arrival, the governor sent the Imam to me with a horse. He himself was ill, but we visited him and he treated us honourably and gave us gifts. He was on the point of setting out for the town of Sari, the capital of the Khan, so I prepared to travel along with him and hired wagons for that purpose. On the wagon is put a light tent made of wooden laths, bound with strips of hide and covered with felt or blanket cloth, and it has grilled windows so that the person inside can see without being seen. One can do anything one likes inside, sleep, eat, read, or write during the march. We set out with the Emir Tuluk Tumur and his brother and 2 sons. At every halt the Turks let loose their horses, oxen and camels and drive them out to pasture at liberty, night or day, without shepherds or guardians. This is due to the severity of their laws against theft. Any person found in possession of a stolen horse is obliged to restore it with 9 others. If he cannot do this, his sons are taken instead, and if he has no sons, he is slaughtered like a sheep. We then prepared for the journey to the Sultan's camp, which was 4 days' march to a place called Bishtagh, which means 5 mountains. In these mountains there is a hot spring in which the Turks bathe, claiming that it prevents illness. We arrived at the camp on the first day of Ramadan and found that it was moving to the neighborhood from which we had just come, so we returned there. I set up my tent on a hill there, fixing a standard in the ground in front of it, and drew up the horses and wagons behind. Thereupon the Mahala approached. The name they give to it is the Urdu, and we saw a vast town on the move with all of its inhabitants, containing mosques and bazaars. The smoke from the kitchens rising in the air, for they cook while on the march, and horse-drawn wagons transporting them. On reaching the encampment, they took the tents off the wagons and set them upon the ground, for they were very light, and they did the same with the mosques and shops. The illustrious Sultan Muhammad Ozbeg Khan is the ruler of a vast kingdom and a most powerful sovereign, victor over the enemies of God, the people of Constantinople the Great, and diligent in warring against them. He is one of the 7 mighty kings of the world. First, the Sultan of Morocco, our master the commander of the faithful, may God strengthen his might and magnify his victory. Second, the Sultan of Egypt and Syria. Third, the Sultan of the 2 Iraqs. Fourth, this Sultan Uzbeg. Fifth, the Sultan of Turkestan and the lands beyond the Oxus. Sixth, the Sultan of India. And 7th, the Sultan of China. The day after my arrival, I visited him in the afternoon at a ceremonial audience. A great banquet was prepared and we broke our fast in his presence. These Turks do not follow the custom of assigning a lodging to visitors and giving them money for their expenses, but they send him sheep and horses for slaughtering and skins of kumiz, which is their form of benefaction. Every Friday after the midday prayer, the Sultan holds an audience in a pavilion called the Golden Pavilion, which is richly decorated. In the center there is a wooden throne covered with silver gilt plates, the legs being of pure silver set with jewels at the top. The Sultan sits on the throne, having on his right the Khatun Taytughli, with the Khatun Quebec on her right, and on his left the Khatun Bayalun, with the Khatun Urduja on her left. Below the throne stand the Sultan's sons, the elder on the right and the younger on the left, and his daughter sits in front of him. He rises to meet each Khatun as she arrives and takes her by the hand until she mounts to the throne. All this takes place in view of the whole people, without any screening. On the morrow of my interview with the Sultan, I visited the principal Khatun, Taytughli, who is the queen and the mother of the Sultan's 2 sons. She was sitting in the midst of 10 aged women who appeared to be servants of hers, and had in front of her about 50 young maidens with gold and silver salvers filled with cherries which they were cleaning. She ordered kimiz to be brought and with her own hand poured out a cupful and gave it to me, which is the highest of honors in their estimation. I had never drunk kimiz before, but there was nothing for me but to accept it. I tasted it, but found it disagreeable and passed it to one of my companions. Thank you guys for watching. This video is a part of Project Exploration, a collaborative effort by a bunch of history YouTubers on discovery and exploration. Check out the playlist for more. I want to thank my patrons for always supporting. If you want to financially support Hikmah History, there's a link to my Patreon in the description to this video. Until next time, peace!